Hello, welcome back to the Pit Stop Podcast. My name is Braydon Dowler-Coltman, and I'm joined as always by my brother Jordan Dowler-Coltman. It's been a few weeks since our last race in Imola. We're going to recap a wild race, some contention on the track, and a big win from Max Verstappen and the Red Bull team. And we have the Portuguese Grand Prix coming up this weekend. Jordan, how you doing? And are you ready to talk F1?
Totally, always ready to talk F1. I'm excited. Let's get going. Let's do it.
Let's go! All right, our first topic this week. We had a big race in Imola. There was, what your prediction was that Max Verstappen was going to win. He did. Lewis had an interesting race. I definitely thought he was going to be the one that was going to be right at the end in the front there. It's so funny how, look back at what happened to Sergio Perez in that last race of the year. The minute that these guys end up kind of like falling out of the pack, they seem to be the ones competing for the pole. And then we had some contention on the track with an accident that took place. George Russell coming in hot on the right side of Valtteri Bottas, knocked them both out of the race. What do you think of what happened there, Jordan?
Yeah, that was certainly one of the storylines that became sort of, the one of the talking points after the race. We heard a lot from just the media in general wanted to get into it because obviously George Russell being in the Mercedes driving program and sort of being the future probable driver for Mercedes when either Lewis or Bottas leaves, that obviously people wanted to know what Toto thought. People wanted to know what was going on. So, and even Toto's response after, I think, kind of fueled that. But I think it was a lot to do about nothing, to be completely honest with you. It was a racing moment. We'd already seen throughout the course of the entire race, which was obviously very exciting because of the weather. It played a huge factor in how strategies had to change, but also just the driver's skill level had to sort of be at top form. They hit a little bit of that wet and they were really in trouble. That's kind of what I think happened there. Bottas just took a bit of an aggressive line and so did George. And we just had a racing incident where two guys came together and luckily no one got hurt. It was obviously a bit more of a sort of a gut punch to Bottas, I think, than it was to Russell because he was ahead and had a bit more of a violent crash. And obviously we saw the little sort of incident when Russell came out and kind of confronted Bottas while he was still in the cockpit. But, I really think it was something people made a lot of news about that probably in the big scheme of things, everyone involved will forget about in the next couple weeks and it'll sort of just disappear until, of course, Netflix brings it up next season. But in truth, I don't think it was as big a deal as everyone made it out to be. I think it was racing.
Well, and George, he was having a great race. This guy was probably going to get some points. That was what was so devastating to me about what happened there is that, you don't want to see anybody get into a collision, but when the Mercedes team is having, a little bit of issue, it's kind of fun to watch. And so for George Russell, who's just trying to go full tilt, trying to get points, it's difficult to see that happen. The other thing, it was wet on the track, like you said, but at the beginning of the race, I don't know how anybody can see anything that's behind P1 or P2. It's got to be different on the track, yeah?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because it was very wet. And I think it was also difficult for the drivers because that part of the track was wet. There were sections of the track, that weren't as wet as other sections. So you've got these tires that are, the intermediate or the wets, and they're designed for slightly different conditions. And when you have variations of conditions throughout the entire track, then your tires are going to give you certain performance in certain corners and certain performance in others. And I think that really was what we saw. We saw some teams really struggle. Most teams, I think, with the exception of only two drivers, were all on the intermediates, which is, meant for, damp to wet conditions, but not heavy rain. We saw Pierre Gasly and the AlphaTauri team started him on the wets, and he really struggled. He didn't have the pace, and eventually, by the time they finally got him off those tires, his race was over. He just wasn't going to have the pace to get back up into a competitive position. I think that was probably frustrating. But yeah, it was a great example of the strategy that is involved in F1, where teams really have to make good decisions. And for an entire week, they prepare the car, they tune the car, they practice on Friday, they qualify on Saturday, and then you get the one thing you didn't really plan on, which was, intermittent rain. All of the team strategies from that they would have been, wargaming all week go out the window an hour before race time, and you have to completely